Hello, credit union friends. Welcome to this episode of Three Questions. I'm Greg Michlig, President and CEO at CUInsight.com. And it's great to be joined by Tarun Patel, VP of Client Processing at Quavo Fraud and Disputes. Tarun, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I know our audience is eager to hear the valuable insights you have to share. So let's jump into those three questions. The first one is most credit unions track write-offs. Now, why is that the wrong number to be watching?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Write-offs just tell you what you lost, not why you lost it.
Hmm.
By the time dispute makes it to the write-off line or stage or decision, the factors that drove that decision were made weeks before that. So it's more like an indications that tells you there is a gap somewhere in the operational process, not the actual number. Re- uh, it's good to have this number. Obviously, every client or credit unions wants to keep that lowest, right? Like that's the ideal situation. But there are multiple driving factors that takes it up first: intake stage, what do you do in the investigation, what kind of factors do you encompass in all the entire fraud investigation, as well as the representments, right? Like chargebacks, how do you fight back with the networks, merchants, what's your indicators? So to me, write-offs are more like a lagging indicator than the directive indication. The more instructive metric that should be used is the recapture, because that tells you the true picture of where you are. It's essentially anything that you had a legitimate right to pursue the merchant or network, and how much did you actually want out of that. That's telling you how much effectively are you running your own business. Uh, Perfect example, write-off is a good number, just not an all-inclusive. So we have quite a few credit unions that we process at Quavo. And top of my head, I have two clients, exact similar write-off numbers. But if you look at the recapture rate, one is in the mid 90s and one is in the low 70s. That is pretty big jump. But if you're only looking at the write-off numbers, you never get to that details that tells you behind the scene. The other aspect of the all this is write-off gets done at day 90 because you want to be into compliance. So if you don't have a response from networks, you want to eat that cost right now. But then you also have a representment already pending. So on system, you wrote it off, but the representment is still going to come back at some point. When it does, there is still potential that you're going to win that back from the merchant. So if you were only looking at the write-off numbers, you will never even get to that point where you say, yeah, I wrote off, but I recovered portion of this through the representments coming back.
Thank you for that explanation. That really helpful for me, and just I like the idea of thinking about that as a lagging indicator as well. Makes a lot of sense. And we were talking before we jumped on to record this that you've been really busy at Quavo. It's a good problem to have. You've got a lot of
Yeah.
activity, which is great. And so you've seen, dispute performance data across hundreds of credit unions. So what separates the ones with strong recapture rates from the ones leaving money on the table?
Yeah, so I think it's a three-tiered answer, right? So absolutely your discipline at Intech, how much data are you capturing right up front? Ask cardholder all the information that you can possibly know. That's where QFD makes a difference because we have a questionnaire that we know we will require all those data to go back to the networks and merchants. But majority of the credit union, when we onboard them newly, that's the biggest gap we see is their intake doesn't encompass everything that we will need down the road. So now essentially you are adding more touches, more back and forth with customer asking for this, that, all that, right? So the strong performer capture right out of the information is essentially clean dispute reason. That's the first and foremost for all chargebacks. Complete cardholder statements, supporting documents, anything that cardholder has that supports that case against the merchant, because that's what gonna make the difference when you go back to the merchant or network and say, I deserve to win this. Um, but on the opposite side, the people that leave the money on the table are essentially reworking cases just to gather all this data, throughout these chunks of it.
Mhm.
And at every rework cycle, there is a chance that you're going to now miss the network deadline because you were supposed to submit the representments or chargeback within 15 days. Now you're going to miss that time frame, and that eventually is going to drive your write-off. So again, that's what I was saying in the first question. Write-off is just the one number, but there are factors up front that drives that number. Um, the second thing is the representment, right? Like, so I always tell my teams representment is a real workflow. It's not an afterthought. You have to treat representments, repris, pre-arbs, all those are a real workflow. So you know the gaps between credit unions and top at the bottom. It's entirely just on the representment side. But the clients that aggressively go after the networks and merchants to, win back the evidence support, if you feel like you have full evidence support, you should go aggressively after the networks because that, it's a traditional effort, right? Like one side is always going to say, no, it's not on me. The other side is always going to say, no, it's on you. It's just how effectively you can prove that. That's what it comes down to. And again, to my original point of the intake, that's what guides this effectiveness of the second layer. And then the third one is just, this one I think surprises most people when I talk about this. It's the strong performers measures themselves against the touches per dispute, not the volume. You could have 5,000 dispute a month. You are a low dispute volume processing client. But if you have, 15,000 touches across those 5,000 disputes, now you are touching same dispute 3 times. That is in itself, that drives significant amount of investment. Now you are putting your analyst to spend time on the same disputes 3 times. You are essentially going back to client. So client is going to get tired. It's like, how many times are you going to keep asking me same information? So my simplest answer is take care of the intake, make sure all the data is gathered, go back to the networks and merchants aggressively if you have all the evidence that supports what the client is saying. And then third, just take care of the touches. Don't leave it for the next person in the line. Try to get as much done up front as you can so that when by the time the decision comes, you are clear to go.
I spent a few years on the payment side of the industry. It's been quite a while since I have, but it's interesting because so many of the points and frustrations that you've brought up are still present. But now with Quavo,
Yeah.
there's a tool there to help them work through all of that. And you being the professional that you are and having all the conversations that you've had and this expertise to solve for this, for a credit union fraud ops leader watching this today, what's the one thing they should do differently starting next week?
Um, that one is tricky. So first and foremost, I would absolutely suggest truly understand where you stand. It's one thing to say I have, you know, 20,000 dispute a month, but I'm only writing off 10% of it. It's the whole different thing to truly know your business, because until you truly know where is my biggest opportunity to thrive, there is nothing you do is going to matter unless you can measure the success of your steps. So I would always tell all my new clients is pull up your last 90 days disputes, segment them by the outcome. What did you do? Did you win the representment? Did you lost it? Did you write it off without even going to the representments? All those categories. And then you ask, why did I do this? So won and lost at representments. One is pretty straightforward. You won it, merchant paid you, you were good. Why did you lost it? And would it have mattered if you would have gathered more data up front? That's the question I asked on the lost. And then the last but not least, the write-off essentially is this the problem in the operational cycle because we took so long to even get to the chargeback stage? Is that what's driving my write-off? Or is it more like I'm just trying to do the right by the client because network already proved me, client authenticated all this, but I get it. The credit unions is a different business philosophy. It's more client first approach, so that's fine. It's just whether do you know truly that's what it is driving, right? So it's knowing versus reality. That's what you need to figure out. That third bucket is almost where all the credit union I talked to finds money that they didn't even knew they were leaving behind. And the main reason is once again, you just don't know why you are writing off. It's one thing you know how much you are writing off. It's a whole different thing on exactly knowing what percentage of that is because of X, Y, or Z.
Right. Well, you've provided a lot of great information. I really appreciate the explanation and the detail. And again, I just want to thank you for joining me on the Three Questions video interview, Tarun. It's been a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise, yeah, happy to join. Appreciate it.
All right. And thanks to everyone who tuned in for this Three Questions video interview. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.